Chapter 7 Uninvited Brothers. Omri was not supposed to ride his bicycle in the road, but he wasn't supposed to ride it on the pavement either. Not fast, at any rate. So he compromised. He rode it slowly on the pavement as far as the corner, then bumped down off the curb and went like the wind. The hardware shop was still open. He bought the seed tray and the seeds and was just paying for them when he noticed something. On the seed packet, under the word marrow, was written another word in brackets, squash. So one of the three sisters was Marrow? On impulse, he asked the shopkeeper, "Do you know what maize is?" M-A-I-Z-E. Maize, son? That's sweet corn, isn't it? Have you some seeds of that? Outside, standing by Omri's bike, was Patrick. Hi, I saw you go in. What did you get? Omri showed him. More presents for the Indian? Patrick asked sarcastically. Well, sort of, if what? If I can keep him long enough till they grow. Patrick stared at him and Omri stared right back. I've been to Yap's, said Patrick. I bought you something. Yeah, what? Said Omri, hopefully. Slowly, Patrick took his hand out of his pocket, held it in front of him, and opened his fingers. In his palm lay a cowboy on a horse, with a pistol in one hand pointing upward, or what would have been upward if he wasn't lying on his side. Omri looked at it silently. Then he shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't want it. Why not? Now you can play a proper game with your Indian. They'd fight. Isn't that the whole idea? They might hurt each other. There was a pause, and then Patrick leaned forward and asked, very slowly and very loudly, how can they hurt each other? They're made of plastic. Listen, said Omri, and then he stopped. Then he started again. The Indian isn't plastic. He's real. Patrick heaved a deep, deep sigh and put the cowboy back in his pocket. He'd been friends with Omri for years, ever since they started school. They knew each other very well. Just as Patrick knew when Omri was lying, he also knew when he wasn't. The only trouble was this was a non-lie he couldn't believe. I want to see him, he said. Omri debated with himself. He somehow felt that if he didn't share his secret with Patrick, their friendship would be over. He didn't want that. And besides, the thrill of showing his Indian to someone else was something he could not do without for very much longer. Okay, come on. Going home, they broke the law even more, riding on the road and Patrick riding on the handlebars. They went around the back way by the alley in case anyone happened to be looking out of their window. Omri said, he wants a fire. I suppose we can't make one inside. You could, Patrick said, on a tin plate, like indoor fireworks. Omri looked at him. Let's collect some twigs. Patrick picked up a twig about a foot long. Omri laughed. That's no good. They've got to be tiny twigs like this. And he picked some little slivers off of the hedge. Does he want the fire to cook on? Asked Patrick. Yes. Then that's no use. A fire made of those would burn out in a few seconds. Omri didn't think about that. What you need, said Patrick, is a little ball of tar. That burns for ages. And you could put the twigs on top of it and it would look just like a real campfire. That's a brilliant idea. I know where they've been tarring the road, too, said Patrick. Come on, let's go. No. Why not? I don't believe in him yet. I want to see him. All right, first I have to give this stuff to my dad. There was a further delay when his father at first insisted on Omri filling the seed tray with compost and planting the seeds in them then and there. But when Omri gave him the corn seed as a present, he said, Well, thanks. Oh, all right. I can see you're bursting to get away. You can do the planting tomorrow before you go to school. Omri and Patrick rushed upstairs. At the top, Omri stopped cold. His bedroom door, which he always shut automatically, was wide open, and just inside, crouching side by side with their backs to him, were his brothers. They were so absolutely still that Omri knew they were watching something. He couldn't bear it. They had come into his room without his permission, and they had seen his Indian. Now they would tell everyone his secret, his precious secret. And it was his alone to keep or to share. It was a secret, no more. Something broke inside of him, and he heard himself scream, "Get out of my room! Get out of my room!" Both boys spun around. "Shh, you'll frighten him," said Adele. Sorry, guys, I got a little tickle. Gillian came in to look for his rat, and he found it. And then he saw this absolutely fabulous little house you've made, and he called me to come look at it. Omri looked at the floor. The seed tray with the longhouse, now nearly finished, had been moved into the center of the room. It was that they had been looking at. A quick glance all around showed no sign of Indian or horse, but Gillian's tame white rat was on his shoulder. "I can't get over it," Adele went on. "How on earth did you do it without using any glue or anything? It's done with tiny little threads and little pegs, and look, Gillian, it's made of real twigs and real bark. It's terrific," he said. With such awe-struck admiration, Omri felt a little ashamed. "I didn't," he said. But Patrick, who had been gaping at the longhouse, gave him a heavy nudge that nearly knocked him over. "Yes," said Omri. "Well, would you mind leaving my room now? And please take your rat. You're not to let him in here. This is my room, you know." "And this is my magnifying glass, you know," said Gillian. But he was obviously too overcome with admiration to be angry at Omri. He was using it now to examine the details of the longhouse. "I knew you were good at making things," he said. "But this is uncanny. You must have fingers like a fairy to tie those little knots. What's that?" he asked. They all heard it, a high, faint whinny coming from under the bed. Omri was galvanized into action. At all costs, he must prevent them from finding out. He flung himself on his knees and pretended to grope under the bed. "It's nothing, only that little dolphin I got in my Christmas stocking," he burbled. "I must have wound it up, and suddenly it started clicking. You know how those things do. It's creepy sometimes when they start clicking." By this time, he leapt up again and was almost pushing his brothers out of the room. "Why are you in such a hurry to get rid of us?" asked Gillian suspiciously. "Just go. You know you have to get out of my room when I ask you." He could hear the little horse whinnying again, and it didn't sound a bit like a dolphin. "That sounds just like a pony," said Adele. "Oh, it is a pony, a tiny witchy little pony under my bed," said Omri. At last they left, not without glancing back suspiciously, and Omri slammed the door, locked it, and leaned at it with closed eyes. "Is it a pony?" asked Patrick. Omri nodded. Then he opened his eyes, lay down again, and peered under the bed. "Give me my flashlight from my chest of drawers." Patrick gave it to him and lay beside him. They peered together as the beam probed into the darkness. "Crumbs," said Patrick. "It's true." The horse was standing, alone, whinnying. When the light hit him, he stopped and he turned his head. Omri could see a pair of leggings behind him. "It's all right, little bear. It's me," said Omri. Slowly, a crest of feathers and then a pair of eyes appeared over the top of the horse's back. "Who others?" he asked. "My brothers. They didn't see you." "Little bear, here coming. Take horse. Run, hide." "Good. Come out and meet my friend Patrick." Little Bear jumped astride the horse and rode proudly out, wearing his new cloak and his new headdress. He gazed up imperiously at Patrick, who gazed back. Then he nodded to Patrick, who tried several times to say something, but his voice just came out as a squeak. "Omri friend, Little Bear friend," said Little Bear magnanimously. Patrick swallowed. His eyes seemed in danger of popping right out of his head. Little Bear waited politely, but when Patrick didn't speak, he rode over to the seed tray. The brothers had brought it out from behind the crate. They'd been careful, but the ramp got moved. Omri hurried to put it back, and Little Bear rode the horse up, dismounted, and tied him to the post he had driven into the compost. Then he went calmly on with his work on his longhouse. Patrick licked his lips, swallowed twice, and croaked, "He's real. He's a real live Indian. I told you." "How did it happen?" "Don't ask me. Something to do with this cupboard. Or maybe it's the key. It's very old. You lock plastic people inside, and they come out alive." Patrick goggled at him. "You mean it's not only him? You can do it with any toy?" "Only plastic ones." An incredulous grin spread over Patrick's face. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's bring loads of things to life, whole armies." And he sprang towards the biscuit tins. Omri grabbed him. "No, wait, it's not so simple." Patrick, his hands already full of soldiers, was making for the cupboard. "Why not?" "Because they'd all. Don't you see? They'd be real." "Real? What do you mean?" "Patrick, Little Bear isn't a toy. He's a real man. He really lived. Maybe he's still. I don't know. Maybe he's in the middle of his life somewhere in America in 17 something or other. He's from the past," Omri struggled to explain. Patrick just looked blank. "I don't get it." "Listen, Little Bear has told me about his life. He's fought in wars. He scalped people, and he grown stuff to eat like marrows, and he even had a wife. She died. He doesn't know how he got here, but he thinks it's magic, and he accepts magic. He believes in it, and he thinks I'm some kind of spirit or something." "What I mean," Omri said, as Patrick's eyes stared longingly at the cupboard, "is that if you put all those men in there, when they come to life, they'd be real men with real lives, from their own times and their own countries, talking their own languages. You couldn't just set them up and make them do what you wanted them to. They'd do what they wanted to, or they might get terrified and run away, or, well, one I tried with, an old Indian, he actually died when he saw me. Look if you don't believe me." And Omri opened the cupboard. There lay the body of the old Indian chief, now made of plastic, but unmistakably dead. And not dead the way some plastic soldiers are made to look, but the way real people look, crumpled up and empty. Patrick picked it up, turning it over in his hand, put the soldiers down. "This isn't the one you bought at lunchtime." "Yes." "Crumbs. You see? Where's his headdress?" Little Bear took it. "He says he's a chief now. It's made him even more bossy and more difficult than before," said Omri, using a word his mother often used when he was insisting on having his own way. And that's where I'm going to stop. It's not the end of the chapter, but it is a very long chapter. And there is a little tiny sketch here. Probably not as good as the pictures that you made in your mind. Oops. Come on, Miss Brian. Okay, so here are Patrick and Omri coming into the room, and there are Omri's brothers looking at the longhouse in the seed tray. And that's where we're going to stop for Friday. And I will see you guys on Monday. Have a good weekend.